Either way.
All good?
Yeah.
Mary, what was it like putting together this panel, bringing it together, being able to be in this moment after 2 years? We're back in person.
I mean, it's so lovely. I was so thrilled when Jenna asked me to come back. I had done over Zoom for, I think, Comic-Con last year, or I don't know what is time,
Right.
but I had done moderated a panel with another group of composers for them, and I just had such a great time, and I do really appreciate taking a look at how composition really shapes our stories. Like, it's just, it can make or break a whole movie. And so, yeah, just great to be back in person doing this panel. And yeah, it's just great to be able to ask, you know, these questions and hear such interesting different answers, because, you know, you don't know exactly what the panelists are going to say, and I was just thrilled today. I felt everyone spoke so intelligently and passionately about their craft, and it's great to hear everyone seems to really love the projects that they're a part of, which is, you know, that's the hope. So
Absolutely.
It's great to just be able to facilitate that and make a few silly jokes.
Yeah. You asked at the panel, you know, what were some of the scores that changed some people's lives? Instantly, I thought of several. I know all the panelists did too. What are some of yours?
You know, it's funny. I was thinking about how it was funny. I asked that question. I was like, oh gosh, what is my answer?
Right?
I was thinking the other day about just in the most thematic, fun, just gets me off my seat. I don't know. There's a metaphor there. Just thinking about the world. I like Hans Zimmer's Pirates of the Caribbean score is just so fun.
I think anything Hans Zimmer does,
Yeah, right, exactly.
right?
It's truly like, and Michael Giacchino is so emotional as well, and you know, someone referenced John Williams' original Star Wars. I mean, it's like there's just a lot of those very nostalgic pieces. I think there are probably a lot more scores that I love that I don't realize I do because of the way that they weave so beautifully into the story. And I relate to this as an actor. Often when you're doing your job right, people aren't thinking about the fact that you're doing your job.
Yeah.
So, and I think, you know, everyone in this room is a great example of that they, you know, they create the energy and you still experience it. You know that the music's there, but it really makes you think about the story, not about the composition. So it's been fun going back. I'm in the process right now of producing a short film that my girlfriend Maddie Goff wrote and we're acting in, but really on the producing side as well. And so we've been really going through and looking at movies that we love and shows that we love, or just anytime we watch something new and going, what are they doing here that really creates that emotional moment? And, you know, thinking of, okay, how are we going to shape that in our piece, and what kind of instrumentation will be best for this type of story? So I've definitely had a sharper eye on that as of late, so I'll have more answers in the future.
So when you first get a creative project, what do you do to get the creative juices flowing? What's the very first step in the process?
It's funny, we were just kind of talking about this. I think every project has a different process, you know, depending on what's needed. I mean, I talk a lot about, certainly with Trek and being cast as a Klingon, it's always research oriented for me, I would say. I'm definitely a geek and a nerd, and I love knowing as much as possible to help myself kind of both calm down and also, you know, focus in on what excites me. But like with Trek, I just went through all the Klingon episodes, and you know,
they are some of the best ones.
They are pretty great. You know, I really did become such a fan of the Klingons, and it's so fun too to meet so many of those actors now and be like, hey, Gowron! Yeah.
Do you have an all-time favorite Klingon episode?
Well, I really do love Grilka's episode in Deep Space Nine with Quark. That, I mean, for me, it's such a fun mixture. Like, there's so much comedy, and she's such an intense, awesome. I obviously had an eye on the Klingon women, and really just loved her performance, and definitely, you know, was inspired by her energy. That's a great one. And then Blood Oath as well. With Dax is great. I definitely like Deep Space Nine a lot. Would you have a favorite Klingon episode?
I bounce around so much. Those are great. I kind of like. I was watching Birthright the other day.
Oh yeah.
And the two-parter with the Klingon Civil War, and you know, those are good too.
Yeah, so. Those are great.
But I also like some of the original ones.
Yep.
So.
There's always good stuff there. But that's what I love in answering your question. Like I love to be able to have those reference points, so that I feel like I'm immersed in the world. And some roles, it's not a 50-year franchise, and there isn't a million episodes that you can watch. So sometimes it's more about the imaginary work that you have to do to create a character. But for me, it's images, sound. I love making playlists for my characters. I kind of always end up having.
Sounds interesting, though.
Yeah.
We know Working is opera, but.
Yeah. But I think it's whatever the character requires. It's kind of taking it a case by case basis. And then luckily, I've had experiences for the most part where your scene partner is great. That's another source of, and then directors, and just being in creative environments where people allow you to explore and ask questions. Don't make you feel bad for asking questions. Obviously, there's certain questions that do your own research, but people that are interested in, who is this character, and why do they walk the way they do or talk the way they do?
Absolutely. And you mentioned you were working on a short film.
Yes.
What is it like working for you in all the different positions all around the camera? Being an actor, being an editor, being a director, being a writer, coming up with playlists, and like figuring out this character. Like, what's your favorite part, or do you just like a little bit of all of it?
It's funny because I definitely define myself as like an actor-producer, and I think what's funny about that, I know I love performing, and I know that's like the forefront for me, what I want to create in my producing, but I think producer's also a position where I do get to dip my toe into kind of all the other stuff, and at least give my opinion on it. But I growing up, like, I was making little movies with my best friend, and we would, edit them together on iMovie and stuff, so and like for school projects, I would always, if you could make a little movie version of the project, I would do that. So I do love the editing process, and but what I'm so grateful for, and I'm actually producing this with Dr. Erin McDonald, who's the science consultant for all of Trek, and she's an excellent producer, and also coming from both her PhD in astrophysics and working for the government, she really knows how to organize things and find forms and stuff in a way that is not my strong suit. So I think we make a very good team in that way. I think we both have a certain galvanizing positive force, but we definitely, have different strengths. So I think it's finding someone like that you can really balance that with. And then what's been so cool, particularly with this short, is Nadi's written this incredible script that has inspired so many people as we continue to reach out, finding our DP, which again, when the DP and the colorists are like talking on our Slack, I'm like, they're asking about like camera things and stuff. I'm like, I'm so glad they know what they're talking about.
I'm just creating.
And then I'll look at it and go, that's pretty, or like, that's a nice color. But it's been really exciting to see how many people from whatever creative angle read a script and are inspired and go, I'd love to like create the props for this, or like I'd love to create the music for it. And I spoke to this a little on the panel that I just think it's so important that we illuminate how collaborative this art form is and how many people go into shaping it. And I'm really proud of the way we've assembled our crew too. It's just, it's been a mixture of people knowing people, and but it's a very inclusive, diverse group, and it's just like the kind of room that I want to be a part of. So for me, I really do like, I've been owning the producer title more, and I have been producing more, but I think for me it really allows me to get a flavor of everything. And then be really grateful that there are people that are specifically skilled at certain things that I'm not as skilled in.
Okay, I got one real quick. What would your dream collaboration project be?
Ooh. Well, it's funny. I would just say I'm right in the thick. We're in pre-production. We're about to go into production for this short, and the team that we've assembled, getting to work with my girlfriend who's so incredibly brilliant and talented, and Erin, who's one of my best friends, like getting to work with them. Like I just want that to keep happening. Like I would love the feature version of that. I would love to just keep creating spaces for everyone on this project who is just bringing their heart and soul because they care about the project. So I'd say, as much as there are plenty of people that I'd love to work with whose work inspires me, but I know for me, I think I'll be the most fulfilled if I'm part of creating those creative spaces. Like that's the dream for me, is to just keep collaborating with the people I love, and maybe just having more people give us the money to do it.
I think we have to wrap
Great,
up. Man,
great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great talking to you both.
It's like it's been so long, so happy to be here.
Joe, I wanted to start out asking you, did you get to work on Boba Fett and you got to work on Jackass forever? And that's crazy. What was it like going between something like that?
It's always fun. I like working in a lot of different styles and genres and with different types of people. You know, it's a collaborative process, this business that I'm in and that we're all in, all these amazing composers here today. It's a collaborative effort, and what's really fun is collaboration with people who have different ideas and different styles in mind, or different approaches to film scoring, you know. And I always find it that one particular project that you work on will always inform the next one, and maybe a style or a process that you used on the last project may not work specifically for the next one, but it like informs your overall musicianship down the line. So I like working in a lot of different styles. It keeps it, they all stay interesting when you get to switch it up a little bit. And hopefully the music works in all the different ways. So it's just fun to mix it up.
No, that's cool. They're both two big series. They both have big communities.
Right.
Were you a fan of both of the series going into them?
Am I a fan of what?
Both of the series going into them?
Oh, yeah. Are you saying with Jackass and with Boba Fett?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, from my childhood, I would say probably both of them. It's like, I would say Jackass started like in my teens, but I was introduced to the Star Wars movies when I was like 9 or 10 from my mother. Mm-hmm. We had this original box set of VHS tapes of the original trilogy, and she was like, you should watch Star Wars, and I was like, what is Star Wars? So I mean, I definitely like relate to both of those in different ways. I mean, the Jackass thing is more just like hilarious and kooky and bizarre, but Star Wars was like a natural like affinity towards like loving the music that was in that John Williams did for those movies, But yeah, I associate both of them with my childhood, which I think hopefully keeps what I do for these series pure. I mean, it's like I want to like think of how I first experienced these franchises as a kid. So yeah.
Jackass is a really unique type of production. How do you bring like a quirky, hilarious sound to life?
So, sometimes it's not doing quirky that makes it funnier. It's like in Jackass, it was basically just the opening sequence of that new movie that they just came out with. I mean, they wanted like true orchestral music, like very hard, very big retro kind of film scoring, like to play it right down the middle as if it was a very important thing. And when
thinking about that scene and I'm putting it all together in my head.
Yes.
So, yeah.
They wanted it to feel very, very serious. It was a very serious monster movie. And obviously, if anyone has seen the movie, you realize what the monster is, and it's just like ridiculous. But yeah, playing it straight, as it were, adds a lot of comedy. You could easily put some different kind of music on that, and it may be hilarious too. But for that exact scene, the directors wanted something like down the middle, as far as like, we're just gonna play this like it's a real deal action monster movie, and that's what's gonna add a lot of value to the comedy of it, and it ended up working.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm curious about the Book of Boba Fett in terms of the score was amazing, and it's like, obviously they use Western themes, so obviously they're all going to say Sergio Leone and blah, 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 blah. But you had that unique, I thought it was a unique challenge of midway through the season, here comes the Mandalorian again. So you have those themes, but yet you have to have new themes, and that must have been really difficult to do.
It was hard in the sense that we wanted it to all feel like one show, but with that said, it's like Chapter 5 of the Book of Boba Fett is a Mandalorian episode. Right. And Jon Favreau told us that at the beginning. He's like, Chapter 5 is a bonus Mandalorian episode. It just feels like, it's, season 2.1 of The Mandalorian. So, I mean, and I had worked with Ludwig on the first 2 seasons of that. So there was a natural progression there of I'm very familiar with those themes, you know, and I love those themes very much. And it was kind of cool because for that episode, the Mando episode inside of Boba Fett, it is our first time to see the Mandalorian without the baby for like most of the episode. I don't know if I'm giving away spoiler or whatever, but musically they wanted to like reference the Mandalorian sound, but have it be a little bit more tragic. Like he lost his identity. He's not with his old friend, the kid, and he's just trying to figure out how to get back to him. You know, so there was I was referencing those themes for sure, but still doing it, trying to make it darker, like he's lost a part of himself almost. But then like he meets up with an old friend, Pelly, so now we're referencing her sound when they build the ship, and you know, it all kind of comes together in chapter 7 when all the characters show back up together. So it was a challenge, but it's really fun to have good themes to work with, you know.
But you also had to come up with the Tusken Raiders, who were a very large part of the...
Very large part. I mean, those are some of my favorite episodes of this series, was like chapters 1 and 2, when Boba really becomes part of that family. And that needed to be a different sound, you know. It was like a flashback timeline. So... and even their environment on Tatooine and their tribal nature and their, you know, a little bit more primal atmosphere in the desert lended itself to a sound that we hadn't heard in Mandalorian at all, you know. So this series definitely has different twists and turns to it, and that made it challenging but also fun to have those different sounds kind of come together by the end, you know. Yeah.
They had asked at the panel, you know, what scores from films and other things like had a big impact on you coming up as a kid. I thought of several. I know, you know, we were limited on time there. Were there any other more scores that you thought of?
It's like Shawshank Redemption was one that has always stuck with me. I mean, honestly, because it's just the childhood thing. Those ones stick with you for long. It's almost like I've heard that the music that you're listening to when you're 12 is like just the most formative time in your life that will always be a part of who you are musically, you know. For me, it was like Forrest Gump. Even though that it was mostly songs, I remember that soundtrack front to back, you know. And you know, even the theme is just incredible. Silvestri and you know, Thomas Newman with Shawshank. It's like these are amazing pieces of music. I mean, I love anything that Bernard Herrmann ever did. I have a lot of that love of like jazz harmony and the suspenseful strings and orchestration. He was just so unique in the way that he presented his themes, and there's always an edge to it. You know, there's this sort of off-kilter, sort of warped edge a lot of times, and then at times it's like Vertigo is just beautiful. And just, you know, it's one of the greatest love themes ever. So, I mean, I would say those, you know, have a big place in my heart. But again, John Williams, it's like, you know, I can't deny how impactful that was for me.
You came up a lot today, so
yeah.
Of course, right?
He's just, you know, I can't wait to hear what he does for Indiana Jones. You know, I think that might be his last score. But yeah, he's just done so much for the filmmaking world and for movies in general that, you know, you got to give the tip of the hat to Mr. Williams for sure. Yeah.
Kind of going on that note, when did you decide or discover like this is something I want to do, and like you kind of discovered like, oh, this is a thing I can do?
Yeah.
When you first started to like decide to follow that path?
I will have to say that you know, I always liked writing. I've studied piano since I was a kid. I always had piano lessons, but I would always find myself not practicing the pieces that I was supposed to be practicing and just writing. You know, and you know, that was just something like I learned to play by ear, and it would always just be like noodling on the piano. I'm a pianist, so anyway. But then in high school, my English teacher, she's actually my aunt. She's a brilliant lady. She had us do a school project on the book Huckleberry Finn, and my friends and I all decided we were going to write a musical and shoot it. You know, and like, you know, my buddy borrowed his parents' video camera or whatever. And this was like my 10th grade year, I think. Anyway, I wrote a musical and had all my friends come over, and like we recorded on this crappy computer, that like the family computer that I had, you know. And yeah, I wrote probably like 20 songs, and we shot it, and it was awful, but it was an amazing experience. We showed it in class, and like everybody got excited about it. So in my head, it's just like a true inspiration to me. So that's where I discovered that I loved writing music for a visual media. You know, it's like, this is amazing. You can like write a song, or you know, write score and shoot a movie, and it, you know, it all kind of works together in a certain way. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that you could really do that until that class project. You know, and then just started doing a ton of student films through college and doing advertising music, and I was like, oh no, this is what I want to do. This is too fun. You know.
Nice.
So yeah, that was the origin story.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Nice to meet y'all.
Dude, before we start, man, I love your jacket and your glasses.
Oh,
I think it's cool, man.
Thank you.
I feel like I'm in the jungle. This is pretty fun. At the panel, they had talked about one of the last questions was, what are some of the scores that have like changed your life or had a big impact on you?
Yeah.
I thought of several, and I'm sure you probably had more that you wanted to tell about. So, were there other ones that you had in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone in this room has been inspired by Mr. Williams, Mr. John Williams. So there's plenty of John Williams stuff that I fell in love with. E.T. is one of my favorites. Kind of underrated one that I adore is Hook, the score to Hook. That doesn't get enough press in my view. So obviously John Williams had a huge influence on me, you know, and I studied at the Royal Academy of Music, so, you know, I used to sort of sway towards very orchestral sounding scores, and that's sort of what got me into it. But nowadays, you know, the cooler kind of hybrid-y things, and the more production-based stuff, I really love too. You know, off the top of my head, I can't think of lots of things, but last year during the pandemic, we watched the White Lotus show, and I thought that score was so different and so cool, and just a really cool way of kind of flipping that genre on its head. So I'm constantly trying to be a sponge and trying to be inspired by loads of different things. But as a kid, I mean, Sylvester Williams were my two big ones.
When you're creating your work, when you're working on a project, what elements of the storytelling come to mind? Is it the way the character moves? Is it the overall mood of the scene that you just saw? Or what kind of speaks to you when you're working?
I think for me it's more about, and it's not always the case, but it's more about what's not happening, what you're not seeing. It's the really interesting thing to me, you know, what are these characters really feeling, you know, because more often than not what they're saying, it's not all there for you to see. So my job is to kind of tie those things together of all the underlying things you're not seeing. You know, and that's a lot harder to do with action stuff, because obviously you need that visceral music to complement what's going on screen. But I always try, and maybe sometimes I don't succeed, but I always try to have that strand of emotion going through there, whatever it might be, whatever the director wants me to portray to the audience. So yeah, it's always very narrative based for me.
Really cool.
So, if you were not a musician, what other field might you have pursued, or would you have wanted to have pursued?
Well, yeah, I mean, I had a choice of three, I think. I still paint, I still draw, I adore it, and that's why I love it. When we moved into our new house and it was lockdown, I was painting all the time, and I think my wife's fed up with looking at my paintings on the wall now. But so either that, or there was a time where I wanted to act. My sister's an actress. But I'm glad I didn't. I think it's a crazier world than I'm in. The cutthroat nature of the acting business is I mean, I'm pretty thick-skinned, but that's a different level of thick-skin. You know, and I've seen my sister go through rejection after rejection, and you know, so I think I made the right choice.
Thank you.
can you tell us a little bit about how did the opportunity to come up to work on something like The Kingsman, like how did that even transpire?
So I had done additional music on the first movie, helping out with the team that did the first movie, and that obviously was Henry Jackman and Matt Marchson, who I did The Kingsman with. And then I was off doing my own stuff on the second one. And then when this prequel came around, Henry couldn't do it, or didn't want to do it, I'm not sure which one it was. And so, Matthew Vaughn was pretty adamant that he wanted like a two-prong attack on this. I know that Matt Marchson was working on Rocket Man at the time. And because he wanted someone to kind of be on from the beginning, I mean, I flew to London and I had a studio next to the set, so Matthew could come in whenever he wanted to.
So he just worked, yeah.
He wanted two guys on it, and I think that I happen to be English, and Mr. Vaughn likes the presence of English people to work on his movies. So, and also we go Matt and I go way back. Matt Marchson, so many Matthews involved in that film. But yeah, Matt Marchson and I go way back. We worked with Henry on so many scores over the last 10, 11 years. So it was sort of a natural choice, which I'm very thankful for that I got to be a part of it. So yeah, that's kind of how it happened. And luckily, Mr. Vaughn was like, all right, cool, he's English, okay, let's do it.
Right,
let's go.
It worked.
So it worked.
Yeah. You mentioned you kind of dabbled in acting and you thought, maybe you wanted to do other creative things. What was it like for you, like deciding, okay, I want to compose music, I want to work on these projects? And I'm sure you do a lot of other things too, but like what made you want to like really follow this path?
It was funny. I mean, I wanted to be like a rock star,
right?
Or a singer-songwriter when I was younger. When I was really young, I was playing cello because my dad's a cellist, so I was playing cello, and my mom's a singer, so I was playing cello and singing, and it was all very a strong classical diet. And as soon as I hit kind of 10, 11, I found the guitar, and then it was like, wow, I want to write songs, and I want to do all that, and it never really panned out. But as the sort of other line of my story, my dad started doing film scores. He started playing on film scores, and I happened to meet Rupert Gregson Williams' stepdaughter. We went to the same school, so I happened to meet Rupert, and so it felt like the stars were aligning. Dad was doing this. I was falling in love with film music. I met Rupert and went to a couple of sessions and recordings, and then I think the first one I went to was Shrek with Harry Gregson Williams, and I just sitting there as a 15-year-old kid or however old I was, just going, oh my god, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'd always had that love, like we spoke about earlier. Back to the Future had a huge impact on me, both as a movie and musically, and other movies. But that moment sitting in that session going, all right, this is what I have to do this. So yeah, I'm not sure if I answered your question, but that's sort of how I've stumbled into this. And I kept in contact with Rupert, and he's been amazingly gracious to me and gave me the time of day and trained me and all sorts of stuff. So I've been very lucky.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I've been very curious about the composition process because they always show in the media the composer at the piano with the sheet music and all that. And I've always wondered, like, obviously there are different instruments. Do you ever do you have like a set instrument you start with, or do you just like whatever the mood strikes? And
it depends on the film. I mean, with the more kind of animation orchestral based movies, I'll start at the piano and I'll work out my main melody on the piano, and if it doesn't work on the piano, it's not going to work on anything else. So I'll start there. With the more kind of contemporary electronic stuff, I like to just gather sounds and just mess with them and see what melodies and things come out of that. But in terms of choosing instruments and things, I mean, we're fortunate nowadays to have so much amazing technology that I have every instrument you could ever want or need in an electronic format. So I have my sequencer on my computer have huge templates of like full Western orchestra plus whatever else I want, whether it's drum kits, pianos, whatever it might be, like African instruments, Indian instruments, whatever it is. So we're in a world now that, unfortunately, the piano and the manuscript paper with the pencil is not a reality.
Yeah.
And directors and producers, they want to hear what it's going to sound like. So, the composers in this room, they've spent years being able to program up realistic sounding scores in a computer.
And that must have been very challenging because you know your music, and now you have to learn computer programming and sequencing.
And that's a question I get asked a lot: is what's your advice to young composers? And often it's like, learn technology, learn the tech, keep listening, keep digesting as much music as possible, and keep honing your craft. But if you can learn your technology and you can get that down, you stand a much better chance of breaking into the business than John Smith, who doesn't know any technology, but he's a fabulous composer.
Right.
Because it's kind of the way in now.
Thank you.
Welcome.
On that note, can you tell us a little bit about how you constructed or made your studio out in London, versus like what instruments you wanted in there, what technology, like how am I gonna make it to where it can give this particular sound? Or what were your thoughts like when you first started making
getting a rig over to London was a bit of an ordeal because I had to figure out, because obviously I've got my rig here in LA, and I had to figure out, do I want a complete copy so I can kind of change between the two? And I think actually, if I look back at it, I made the wrong decision. But at the time, my LA rig was quite old. It was 4 or 5 years old. So I didn't want to create exactly the same rig and buy a bunch of old gears. And then I had 2 rigs that are going to be out of date in a couple of years. So I updated it and, as compact as possible, because it had to go in a flight case and had to go and be basically in a room not dissimilar to this, next to a set in the middle of nowhere in England. So I basically, not to bore you, I made it as close to my rig in LA as possible, which basically has everything on it, from violins to air hooves to whatever I might need, which is great. And in the modern world, we can literally have anything at our fingertips. Having said that, the score we knew from fairly early on was going to be a traditional orchestral score, so I didn't have to load it up with literally everything, which saved on space.